Welcome to True Echo, where powerful moments, real or inspired by truth, are brought to life in stories that remind us of what truly matters. Today's story unfolds in the corridors of one of America's busiest airports, where silence, honor, and sacrifice met confusion, confrontation, and ultimately, transformation. When a tomb guard escorting a fallen soldier is stopped by security, the entire terminal holds its breath. What follows is a moment that no one who witnessed it will ever forget. Stay with us. Dorian Ellison stepped off Flight 216 with the kind of quiet dignity that never asked for attention but earned it anyway. The air inside Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was thick with the usual clamor, rolling suitcases, boarding calls, soft murmurs from early morning travelers, but Dorian moved like he was in another world entirely. Black service jacket crisp, white gloves spotless, hat pulled low, boots gliding over the floor like they belonged there more than any other place. He wasn't here for a vacation. He wasn't returning home. He was walking with someone who couldn't walk anymore. The casket beneath his steady hands was draped in a flag, stars tight, stripes perfect. Staff Sergeant Lennox Rafford hadn't made it back on his own feet, but Dorian would make sure he came home with honor. That was his duty. That was the oath. His steps were precise but not exaggerated, trained, not rehearsed. Dorian didn't perform. He remembered. He protected. Eyes slowly turned toward him as he passed the windows and rows of seated passengers. A few lifted their coffee cups more slowly. A boy with one earbud in froze mid-sip. No one pulled out a phone. Not yet. It wasn't that kind of spectacle. It was deeper. Wordless. A TSA agent standing to the side leaned into her colleague. "That's a tomb guard, right?" The other nodded silently. They knew. But not everyone did. From a side hallway, a young airport security officer, clipboard in hand, ponytail bouncing behind her, hurried toward Dorian. Her badge read, Gentry. Mid-20s, confident, fresh. She didn't see the flag first. She saw protocol. "Excuse me, sir," she called, jogging up beside him. Dorian didn't stop. "Sir, I need to see your access credentials." "I'm currently escorting a fallen soldier to ground transport," Dorian said evenly, never breaking stride. "I am not to be delayed." There was no arrogance in his voice, no challenge. Just fact. Truth in a uniform. But Gentry stepped in front of the casket. "This area is restricted. I wasn't informed of any ceremony today." Dorian's hand tightened slightly on the casket rail. He stopped, not because he wanted to, but because she made him. "Ma'am," he said, still calm, "step aside. Please." Gentry held firm. "I'm just following protocol. If I let you through without clearance." A mechanic in a Delta maintenance vest, gray at the temples, slowly approached. "Hey, maybe we should just call a supervisor," he said gently. "I am the supervisor on this concourse," she snapped. Now people were really watching. Not loud. Not recording. Just still. Then, from across the terminal, a voice rose, not sharp, but urgent. "Don't touch that flag." The woman striding forward didn't need to announce herself. She moved with the kind of authority that couldn't be borrowed. Her navy blouse was pressed, her shoes worn from years on her feet. Her name tag read, Tasha Pennington, but she was known to anyone who'd passed through Terminal C more than once. She didn't look at Gentry. Her eyes were locked on the flag, the casket, and the man walking beside it. "Step back," she said firmly. "You don't touch that." Gentry hesitated, caught between training and something she couldn't define. "Ma'am, I was just." "I said step back," Tasha repeated, voice low but final. "Write me up if you want. That man is not to be stopped. And you sure as hell don't lay hands on that flag." Dorian's eyes flicked toward her for the first time. He saw the pin under her badge. A small gold cross. My father did 3 tours in Nam, Tasha said, more gently now. He told me stories about the honor guard. Said you were the reason some of his friends came home with dignity. He gave a slight nod. The kind you only earn, not give away. Around them, the crowd grew, now 20, maybe more. No cameras yet. Just silence. I didn't realize, Gentry stammered. That's not cargo, Tasha said. That's someone's son. Someone's dad, maybe. And that man, she nodded at Dorian, is walking him home. Gentry finally stepped aside. Her hand dropped. Her face flushed. I'm sorry, she whispered. Dorian resumed walking. Not quickly. Not proudly. Just, forward. Tasha fell into step beside him. I'll walk with you to the van, she said. Just in case someone else forgets what that uniform means. They didn't speak much after that. They didn't need to. Dorian's presence was its own kind of language, silent, solemn, unshakable. Tasha matched his pace, her hands folded in front of her, shoulders squared. Every so often, someone in the terminal would stop walking, remove their hat, lower their head. Some didn't know the full story, most never would, but they felt something in the air. Something sacred. A janitor paused beside a vending machine and stood at attention. A woman with a stroller stopped mid-roll, clutching her child's hand. A businessman put down his phone and simply watched. The further they walked, the quieter it became. Outside the sliding doors, the transport van waited. Back doors open, clean and ready. A Vietnam-era vet in a windbreaker stood by the driver's side. He didn't move, didn't speak, he just saluted. Dorian turned to Tasha. You didn't have to do that. I know, she replied. But it was the right thing. He nodded, barely more than a tilt of the chin. She looked him over, not as an officer, not even as a soldier, but as someone doing a job no one else could do. You ever get tired of doing this? Dorian paused. No. Why not? He glanced down at the flag, then back up. Because every time I do, it means someone else doesn't have to. Before Tasha could respond, a tall man in a blazer approached. Broad shoulders, silvering hair, aviator glasses still on indoors. His badge swung slightly as he moved, Federal Security Director. Bryce Hanford. He didn't bark. He didn't posture. But his voice cut through the air like a blade. Who stopped this procession? He asked, not angry, yet, but with weight that turned heads. Gentry raised her hand slightly. It was me, sir. Hanford's eyes narrowed. What's your name? Officer Alyssa Gentry. He nodded once. Gentry, tell me which protocol calls for inspecting a military escort with a flag-draped casket. She hesitated. I didn't recognize the clearance. I didn't realize who he was. You thought wrong, Hanford replied, composed but firm. We brief escort protocol every 90 days. You should have known. And if you didn't, you should have asked. Tasha stepped forward before the words cut too deep. She didn't mean harm. She just didn't know better. Hanford glanced at Tasha. There was respect there, history, even. I get that, he said. But it doesn't excuse disrespect. Intentional or not. You don't touch the flag. You don't question a guard on duty. You don't interrupt dignity. Gentry nodded slowly. I understand, sir. Hanford turned to Dorian. Sergeant, on behalf of this airport and TSA, I apologize. This shouldn't have happened. Dorian's voice was calm, unwavering. It's not about me. It's about who I'm walking with. There was a long silence. The kind that didn't feel empty. Tasha finally spoke. We good now? Hanford looked at the van, then back at Dorian. We're good. With care that couldn't be faked, Dorian slid his gloved hands beneath the rails and lifted the casket onto the transport bed. No fanfare. No rush. Just reverence. The veteran by the van saluted again. No one told him to. No one had to. Tasha turned to Dorian. I've worked here 23 years. Seen a lot of people come through. But I've never seen anyone carry themselves the way you do. Dorian didn't smile, but something in him softened. It's not for show, he said. It's for the fallen. She nodded and stepped back as he climbed into the van's passenger seat, never taking his eyes off the casket, even as the doors shut behind him. The van pulled away without a sound but carried a silence louder than any announcement ever could. No music. No engine revs. Just the rolling hum of purpose as it disappeared behind the service gate, leaving Tasha standing beneath the overhang, hands clasped, breath steady. But the story didn't stop there. Jerome Thacker, a truck driver from Shreveport, had been seated quietly near gate C-42 with a lukewarm breakfast burrito in hand when the moment began to unfold. He wasn't the type to film things. He hated it, actually, thought people were too obsessed with their phones to really see anymore. But something about the way Dorian walked, the unwavering focus, the posture carved from duty, made him hit record. 90 seconds. No narration. No effects. Just raw footage. That night, back in his motel room, Jerome uploaded the clip to Facebook with a simple caption. Tomb guard stopped by airport security while escorting fallen soldier. Man didn't even blink. Carried that casket like he was walking on sacred ground. He went to bed with 7 likes and 1 comment. By morning, it had over 2 million views. The video exploded, not because it was polished or dramatic, but because it was true. It struck a nerve deep in the American soul, in veterans, in widows, in children who had grown up beside folded flags and shadow boxes. The comments were not just reactions, they were testimonies. My brother served in the 3rd Infantry. He said the tomb guards are the reason people still believe in honor. That woman in the navy blouse, Tasha, helped me years ago when my mom lost her luggage. Of course, she stepped in. That guard didn't flinch. Not once. God bless him. The clip spread fast. By noon, local news anchors were retweeting it. By 3 p.m., it was on every major feed from CNN to Fox. It didn't matter what side of the aisle you were on, this was respect, raw and real. Tasha hadn't even seen the video yet. She was still working a double shift. There'd been a storm delay, and she was rerouting passengers while juggling gate changes. It wasn't until she sat down in the break room, half-eaten granola bar in one hand, her phone in the other, that a coworker tapped her arm and said, "You're on the internet." She watched the clip without blinking. Watched herself say, "Don't touch that flag." Watched Dorian stand tall, immovable, silent. And then a voice, soft but audible in the background. "Do you even know who he is?" She didn't know where the voice had come from. But it echoed through the video like a hymn. That night, hundreds of miles away in Fresno, California, a widow sat alone in her living room. The sun was fading behind the curtains, casting gold over everything like a memory. Janelle Rafford hadn't slept more than 2 hours a night since the knock came on her door. Explaining death to children was like trying to staple mist. Nothing stuck. Nothing made sense. She hadn't wanted to open the video. 7 people had sent her the link, but she couldn't bring herself to click. Not until that evening. Not until the boys were in bed. The screen loaded slowly. A man in uniform appeared, gloved hands on a casket she knew far too well. Her throat caught. She watched him move through the terminal, saw the confrontation, the pause, the moment when everything could have gone wrong, and then the woman, stepping in like an avenging angel. The silence. The slow walk. The reverence. And for the first time in days, Janelle cried. But not the broken, heaving sobs that had left her empty the day they handed her Lennox's effects. This was different. Quieter. Fuller. Her oldest, Brilon, wandered out from his room, clutching his favorite blanket. "Mom. What are you watching?" She wiped her eyes. "It's a video. Someone filmed the man who brought your daddy home." He sat beside her, head against her arm. "Is that him?" "No," she said gently, pointing at the screen. "That's the guard. That's the man who made sure your daddy didn't come home alone." Brilon tilted his head. He looked serious. "He's supposed to. That's part of his job." "Is he sad?" "I think so," she whispered. "But he's not allowed to show it." When the video ended, Brilon looked up. "Can I meet him someday?" Janelle didn't answer. "Not right away." Back at Hartsfield-Jackson, Tasha sat on the bench outside the employee entrance, the Georgia air thick with early evening heat. Her granola bar was forgotten. Her phone was heavy in her palm. She wasn't thinking about the millions of views. Not even the attention. Her mind was somewhere else, years earlier, in her childhood living room, watching the Memorial Day parade on TV with her father, Royce Pennington. A veteran himself. He used to point at the screen when the tomb guards appeared, standing by the unknown soldier. "You see those boys in the white gloves?" he'd said. She was only 7 then. "Yeah. They don't blink. They don't break. They guard the tomb 24 hours a day. Rain or shine." "Why?" He had leaned back in his recliner and said something she never forgot. "Because some folks gave everything. And it's our job to remember." Tasha didn't understand it at the time. But today, in that moment with Dorian, she had. She hadn't stepped in for recognition. She stepped in because respect isn't optional, not when someone else already gave more than you'll ever be asked to. She tucked her phone away just as a passing pilot nodded her way. "Saw the video," he said. "You did right." She didn't answer, just gave a faint smile and stood up to go back inside. But the story still wasn't over. 2 days later, Dorian returned to the airport. Same boots. Same uniform. Different weight. This time, he wasn't escorting anyone. He was headed back to Washington, D.C., back to the 3rd Infantry Regiment, back to the hallowed walk at Arlington. But something about this return felt heavier than the casket he'd carried. He moved through the terminal the same way as always, quiet, steady, unseen. Or so he thought. Near the bookstore, a woman glanced up from a magazine rack. Her eyes widened. She tapped her friend's shoulder. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the one from the video." Dorian kept walking. When he arrived at gate D-17, a Delta staffer approached, visibly flustered but smiling, holding a folded piece of paper in her hands. "Are you Dorian Ellison?" "Yes, ma'am," he replied, unsure whether to brace or relax. She handed him the note. "Someone left this for you. Said you'd be passing through." He unfolded the paper. The handwriting was simple. No signature flourish. Just honest words. "I don't know your story, but you helped carry mine. My husband was Staff Sergeant Lennox Rafford. I saw what you did. My son saw it too. Thank you for treating him like he still mattered. You didn't speak, but we heard you. Janelle Rafford." Dorian didn't move for a long time. The paper rested in his gloved hands like it weighed 10 pounds. He folded it carefully and slid it into his jacket, not like a note, but like something sacred. The gate agent hesitated. "There's actually one more thing." He tilted his head slightly. "Some of the staff and passengers wanted to, well, do something." "What kind of something?" She stepped aside. And that's when Dorian saw it. Near the boarding lane, a line of people stood shoulder to shoulder. 20 or more. Airport workers. Random passengers. A janitor still holding a mop. They weren't chanting. They weren't filming. They were just standing, hats off, hands over hearts. And then, without a word, the silence rippled. More people stopped walking. Some placed their hands on their chests. Others removed their hats, unsure why, but knowing it mattered. A little boy tugged his mother's sleeve. "Why is everyone stopping?" She bent low and whispered, "Because that man did something for someone who couldn't do it for themselves." Dorian stood still. Not frozen. Just, absorbing it. This wasn't applause. This wasn't recognition. It was understanding. And for the first time in what felt like years, Dorian didn't feel alone. The quiet around him was different from the silence he knew at Arlington. That silence was sacred, ceremonial, etched into marble and ritual. But this was organic. It had bloomed not from command, but from choice. People standing still. People choosing to acknowledge something most rush past. And for the first time in a long time, Dorian Ellison let himself feel it. He gave a subtle nod, barely perceptible, and proceeded to board the aircraft. Still composed. Still focused. But the letter from Janelle was pressed to his chest inside his jacket pocket, close enough to feel with every breath. The gate closed. The aircraft door sealed. Passengers shifted in their seats, fastening belts, adjusting vents, pulling out earbuds. Then the intercom cracked to life. It wasn't the usual pilot's voice. It wasn't even the calm, well-rehearsed speech of a flight attendant. It was something else entirely. "Ladies and gentlemen," the attendant began, her voice a little shaky but strong enough to hold attention. "Before we depart, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge someone very special on board." Heads turned. Conversations hushed. "Today, we are honored to carry a passenger who recently completed one of the most sacred duties in the U.S. Army. Sergeant Dorian Ellison, a tomb guard, escorted one of our nation's fallen soldiers through this very airport." A ripple passed through the cabin. The attendant continued, voice softening. "He didn't ask for this recognition. He never would. But sometimes, gratitude doesn't wait for permission." Dorian sat motionless. He didn't wave. He didn't stand. His eyes remained forward. And then, softly, from the back of the plane came a single clap. Just one. Then another. And another. It wasn't applause. It was measured. Rhythmic. Like the slow cadence of a flag being folded at a graveside. He bowed his head, just enough. The clapping died down, not because people lost interest, but because the moment had spoken. The engines roared to life. The plane lifted. And Dorian, for all his discipline and composure, closed his eyes, not to rest, but to remember. Back in Fresno, the sun was setting over a quiet street. Janelle stood on the front porch with her two sons. A slight breeze rustled the neighbor's flag. Brelan looked up. "Mom, is that man going to do it again? Escort another soldier?" She nodded slowly. "He will." "Do they always walk alone like that?" Janelle thought about it for a moment. "Sometimes," she said. "But not really. Not when people are watching." The boy seemed to consider her answer carefully. "Is it okay that we watched?" She smiled. "It's more than okay. That's why he walked like that. So we'd remember." Inside, the TV played a news segment about the video. The anchor said Dorian's name. Showed the clip. Quoted Janelle's letter, which had been shared by a family friend. The internet was still ablaze with stories of honor. And yet, for the people closest to it, none of that mattered. It wasn't about going viral. It was about being seen. 2 weeks later, the morning sun cast long shadows across the white marble at Arlington National Cemetery. The air was still, heavy with reverence, as though even nature knew it was standing on sacred ground. Dorian Ellison adjusted his hat, gloved hands moving with precision. He stood at the edge of the mat in front of the tomb of the unknown soldier, boots lined perfectly, spine straight. It was just before his shift, and no crowd had gathered yet. No school buses. No tourists. Just silence and mist curling low around the tomb. He took 21 steps forward. Paused. Turned. Took 21 steps back. The same as always. The same as yesterday. The same as tomorrow. Because some things are not about applause. Not about being seen. They're about being right. Dorian didn't think about the video anymore. He didn't dwell on the letter in his chest pocket, though it remained folded carefully in the drawer of his locker, a quiet reminder of something bigger than duty. He didn't need the headlines, the praise, the hashtags. Because honor isn't about visibility. It's about consistency. That walk in the airport, the confrontation, the stillness of strangers, it had all been real. But this was the origin. The reason. Every time he took those steps at Arlington, he wasn't alone. He carried names. Stories. Losses. Burdens too heavy for most but essential to be borne. And somewhere out there, in cities and suburbs and dusty towns, people were still watching that 90-second clip. Still passing it to others. Still whispering, "Do you even know who he is?" But maybe the better question was, do you know what he stands for? At True Echo, we bring you stories that aren't just powerful, they remind us of who we are and who we could be. Dorian Ellison didn't set out to be a symbol. He walked with silence, carried honor, and never asked for the world to notice. But the world did. Because when you walk with dignity, especially when no one's looking, that's when it matters most. As Tasha once said, you don't touch that flag. And you don't stop a man walking someone home. If this story moved you, share it. Not for clicks. Not for trends. But because someone out there needs to see what respect looks like. Subscribe to True Echo for more real, unforgettable stories. Comment below with your thoughts, or share your own experience. And if you believe honor is still worth something in this world, hit that share button. Let's make sure we never forget.